Admiral Trescall surveyed the star-dusted blackness from the bridge of his flagship, the eternal dominance, a deep satisfaction warming his chest. Another rebellion, another world crushed under the heel of the Valorian Empire. These little uprisings were pathetic, really. For 3,000 years, his people had reigned supreme over 847 star systems. They were absolute, unbeatable. At least, that's what they all thought. But what happens when an empire that believes it has seen everything encounters something truly new? You're about to find out. "Admiral, sir," a voice cut through his thoughts. It was Sensor Officer Marilyn. She was young but incredibly sharp, her four eyes blinking in rapid succession as she stared at her console. "I've got a strange reading on the long-range sensors." Trescall turned his massive, scaled frame towards her, the bridge lights gleaming on his high-ranking armor. "Strange how?" he rumbled. "It's a ship, sir. A single vessel coming out of Dead Zone Sector 7. Marilyn's fingers danced across her controls. "Our charts only show one planet in that entire sector, Earth. A primitive little mudball we wrote off 500 years ago. No tech, no space travel, nothing worth a second look." Captain Zevthor, the ship's commander, leaned forward in his chair. "It's probably just a ghost signal from a comet," Zevthor dismissed. "Those dead zones are notorious for false readings." "With all due respect, Captain, this is no ghost," Marilyn insisted, her voice wavering slightly. "I'm reading a power core and active propulsion. But, sir, the ship's design, it doesn't match a single file in our database." That snagged Trescall's attention. The Imperial database was exhaustive, containing every ship schematic from every spacefaring race ever discovered. "Put it on the main screen," he commanded. The starfield was replaced by a grainy, distant image. The ship was tiny by Imperial standards, maybe the size of a frigate, with a strange angular hull as black as the void itself. It had no lights, no markings, and wasn't broadcasting any identification signal. "Magnify," Trescall ordered. As the image sharpened, a ripple of unease went through the bridge crew. The ship's hull seemed to drink their sensor pings instead of reflecting them, its surface possessing a texture that looked fundamentally wrong. The engines burned with a blue-white intensity that was too pure, too focused. "What's its velocity?" Trescall asked, his voice tight. Marilyn checked her instruments, then checked them again. "Sir, it's traveling at 95% of the speed of light, without any visible faster-than-light engines." The bridge fell utterly silent. That was impossible. Not even the Empire's most advanced ships could approach light speed without a massive jump drive. The sheer power required would be astronomical. "What's its destination?" Captain Zevthor asked, breaking the quiet. "It's heading straight for us, sir," Marilyn replied. "On its current trajectory, it will be in weapons range in about 40 minutes. Trescall weighed the situation. An unknown ship, wielding impossible technology, on a direct intercept course with an Imperial fleet. This was either the act of a complete fool or a terrifyingly dangerous opponent, maybe both. "Open a channel," he commanded. "All standard frequencies. I want to know who they are and what they're doing here." The communications officer, a slender Valoran named Kresh, got to work. "Broadcasting the standard Imperial greeting now, sir." They waited. 5 minutes crawled by, then 10. The mystery ship just kept coming, its speed and course unwavering. "Send it again," Trescall snapped. "In all 847 registered languages." Kresh's fingers blurred over the console. "Transmitting now, sir." He paused, listening. "Still nothing, Admiral." A hot flash of anger rose in Trescall. The sheer audacity to ignore a transmission from the Valorian Empire. "Fire a warning shot," he snarled. "Minimum power plasma bolt right across their bow. Let's see if that gets their attention." "Yes, sir," Zevthor acknowledged, tapping his command screen. "Weapons, you have your orders. A warning shot." The Eternal Dominance's forward cannons whined as they charged, a low thrum vibrating through the deck. A brilliant spear of plasma tore through the vacuum of space, carefully aimed to pass in front of the approaching vessel. It was the universal, "We mean business" signal. The unknown ship didn't slow down. It didn't change course. It didn't react in any way at all. "Did they even see it?" Trescol demanded. "They had to have, sir," Marilyn said, leaning so close to her screen her nose almost touched it. "A blast that size would have overloaded any standard sensor array." She paused. "Admiral, I'm detecting something new. The ship is deploying things. Small modules are extending from its hull." "Are they weapons?" Captain Zevthor was now on his feet. I don't think so, sir," Marilyn replied. "They're too small. They look more like sensor pods or communication relays. I can't get a positive eye." Trescol had been in command for 60 years. He'd won 17 major campaigns. He trusted his gut, and right now, his gut was screaming at him that this entire situation was deeply, fundamentally wrong. This ship wasn't following any rules of engagement he'd ever seen. "All ships," he announced, his voice booming across the bridge. "Assume battle formation Delta. If this newcomer wants a fight, we'll be the ones to give it to them." The fleet responded instantly. 12 massive battlecruisers shifted into a deadly spearhead. 40 destroyers formed a protective screen, flanked by hundreds of smaller support ships. It was a perfect textbook formation, the result of centuries of imperial military doctrine. The full, overwhelming power of a Valorian battle fleet was on display, ready for war. The lone, dark ship just kept coming. It was close enough now that details were visible without magnification. The hull was a bizarre mix of smooth curves and sharp angles. There were no visible gun ports, no shield projectors, nothing that suggested it was a warship. "Try hailing them one last time," Trescol said. "This is their final chance to identify themselves before we classify them as hostile." Kresh sent the message. The seconds dragged on. "No response, Admiral," he finally reported. Trescol straightened his uniform. It was time to make a decision. An unidentified vessel with impossible technology, refusing all communication and heading straight for his fleet. Imperial protocol was crystal clear. "Order destroyers Hammer and Anvil to intercept and disable that ship. Use EMP cannons. I want it dead in the water. Then we'll board it and get some answers." "Yes, sir," Captain Zevthor confirmed. The 2 destroyers peeled away from the main formation, their engines flaring bright as they accelerated. They were swift, powerful ships, each one packing enough firepower to crack a small moon. Their electromagnetic pulse weapons were designed to shut down any known technology in the galaxy. Nothing could withstand a direct hit. The destroyers moved into position. Twin lances of pure electromagnetic energy, invisible to the eye but lethal to any electronic system, shot out and struck the unknown vessel dead on. Marilyn gasped. "Admiral, the ship's hull. It's doing something. The surface is rippling, almost like liquid metal. It's somehow dispersing the EMP blast, just shunting the energy across its skin and bleeding it off into space." "That's not possible," Zevthor whispered, but they were all seeing it. The mysterious ship sailed onward, completely unharmed. The most powerful disabling weapons in the Imperial arsenal had done absolutely nothing. "All ships! All weapons!" Trescol roared, his composure finally cracking. "Target that vessel! Plasma missiles! I want everything we have thrown at it!" Alarms blared as the entire fleet powered up its weapons and locked on. The Eternal Dominance alone could incinerate a continent. The combined fleet could shatter a planet. Just as the order was about to be given, Miralin's terrified voice sliced through the noise. "Sir, the enemy ship is slowing, matching our velocity, and, oh my stars. Admiral, I'm reading a power surge across its entire structure. Every single system is activating at once." "What kind of systems?" Trescol demanded. "I don't know, sir. The energy readings are off the charts. They don't make any sense. They're building exponentially. Whatever they're powering up, it's drawing more energy than our entire flagship's reactor." "Weapon status!" Captain Zevthor yelled. "All batteries are green and ready," the weapons officer shouted back. "We have a firing solution locked!" Trescol stared at the screen. The dark ship just hung there in space, a silent, inscrutable predator. For the first time in his long career, he felt a powerful urge to run, to order the fleet to turn and flee. But he was an admiral of the Valorian Empire. They did not run from a single, unidentified ship. The Empire had stood for 3,000 years because men like him never backed down. "Fire everything," he said, his voice a low growl. But before his command could even be carried out, the universe seemed to blink. The unknown ship simply vanished. 1 second it was there, a solid object on every screen and sensor. The next, it was gone. Every reading flatlined. No heat signature, no energy trail, nothing. It was as if it had never existed at all. "Where did it go?" Zevthor screamed. "Find it now." "Scanning all spectrum, sir," Marilyn cried out, her 4 eyes wide with panic. "It's not there. It's just gone. There was no FTL signature, no energy spike to indicate a jump, nothing." She trailed off, her face turning ashen. "What?" Trescol demanded. "What is it?" "Sir, it's back on the scope. But it's not where it was a second ago. It just jumped 3,000 kilometers in the blink of an eye. No acceleration, no engine trail. It just reappeared in a totally new spot." The main view screen flickered, updating the scene. The mysterious ship was now sitting right behind their entire defensive line. It was nestled between the escort ships and the flagship, having somehow crossed a massive distance without ever actually traveling through it. That just wasn't possible. Teleportation was a fantasy. It broke a dozen laws of physics. "All ships retarget!" Captain Zethor was screaming orders now. "Get a defensive screen around the flagship!" But before a single ship could react, before any weapon could be brought to bear, a sound echoed across the bridge. It came from every speaker, every comms panel, and every single screen. It was a calm, robotic voice, speaking their language perfectly. "Target locked." The voice was completely flat, with no emotion at all, just stating a fact. But those 2 words sent a chill down Admiral Trescol's spine. "Sir," Marilyn whispered, her eyes glued to her console as if she was watching her own doom unfold. "Admiral, that ship isn't just locked onto us. It's locked onto every single ship in the fleet, all of them." "How is that even possible? We have 73 ships scattered across hundreds of thousands of kilometers," Trescol snapped. One tiny ship couldn't possibly target all of them at once, but the proof was right there on her screens. Every single Imperial ship had a target lock on it, a solid, active, unbreakable lock. Trescol opened his mouth to give a command, though he had no idea what command could possibly help them now. His ship was bigger, his weapons were stronger, and his fleet was massive. But in that moment, none of it seemed to matter. They were up against something that didn't play by the known rules of the universe. The robotic voice spoke again, but this time it sounded different, not emotional, but emphasized. "Attention. This is the retribution from the Terran Colonial Defense Fleet. You have fired on a human vessel without provocation. Under Terran military law, this is an act of war. You have 10 seconds to power down your weapon systems and prepare for a full scan. If you don't comply, your military assets will be neutralized. This is your one and only warning." Human? Terran? The primitive species from that backwater planet Earth? The pre-warp civilization that couldn't even escape their own solar system 500 years ago. Trescall felt his entire world spin. Everything he thought he knew, everything he believed about the Empire's absolute power was suddenly crumbling. But he was still an admiral. He was still in command of this fleet, and he would not be cowed by one ship, no matter what parlor tricks it could pull. "This is Fleet Admiral Trescall of the Valorian Empire," he announced, his voice booming with the authority of 3,000 years of galactic conquest. "You are trespassing in Imperial space. You will power down immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. You cannot win against this fleet." The countdown was still ticking in his head. 10 seconds, 9, 8, "All weapons open fire," he ordered, his voice dangerously quiet. "Give them everything we've got." The bridge crew paused for a split second, then their training kicked in. Fingers danced across consoles, weapon systems armed, targeting computers confirmed their locks. 5 seconds, 4, 3. On the view screen, the dark ship just hung there in the void, silent, as if it was waiting. 2 seconds. "Fire!" Captain Zevthor yelled. 1 second. The Imperial fleet unleashed a torrent of pure destruction. Plasma cannons erupted. Kinetic missiles streaked through the black. Beams of energy sliced through space. It was enough firepower to turn a small moon into dust, all of it aimed at one small ship. 0. The unknown ship didn't even try to dodge. It didn't flinch. For a single heartbeat, Trescall thought they'd won. He thought that their overwhelming firepower had crushed the enemy just like it always had. And then his entire bridge went black. Red emergency lights flickered to life, bathing everything in an eerie glow. Alarms wailed. Display screens sparked and died. The weapon systems shut down. Navigation went offline. Even the constant low hum of the engines went silent. "Report!" Trescall shouted over the chaos. "Sir, we've lost all primary power," someone yelled back. "Weapons, nav, shields, everything's gone. We're running on life support and emergency backups only." Captain Zevthor was desperately trying to get his console to respond, but it was dead. "Admiral, we're dead in the water, and sir, I'm getting messages from the other ships. Every single vessel in the fleet is reporting the exact same thing. A complete, fleet-wide system failure." Marilyn somehow managed to get one small sensor screen working. What she saw made her voice tremble. "Admiral, that ship, the human ship, it's fine. All of our weapons hit it dead on, and it's completely undamaged. There's not a single scratch on it." "How is that possible?" Trescall stared at the view screen, now running on emergency power. The dark ship was still there, silent and motionless, watching them with what felt like pure contempt. "What have we done?" he whispered. The mechanical voice came back, and this time it carried a chilling finality that made every person on the bridge freeze in terror. "You have chosen poorly." The eternal dominance floated helpless in the void. All around it, the pride of the Imperial fleet drifted like giant metal coffins. No engines, no weapons, no way to communicate beyond short-range emergency signals. 73 of the finest warships ever built, each a symbol of valor and power, had been turned into nothing more than expensive tombs. Admiral Trescall stood on his darkened bridge, lit only by the pulsing red emergency lights. He gripped the command rail so tightly his claws dug into the metal. In 60 years of service, he had never, ever felt this helpless. The flagship that had conquered 17 star systems couldn't even turn on its own lights. "How?" Captain Zevthor asked the question in a hushed tone, as if speaking too loudly might provoke another attack. "How did one ship do all of this to an entire fleet?" Marilyn was hunched over her backup sensor station, the only one that was still working. The dim light from the screen reflected in her 4 eyes as she pored over the data. "Sir, I've been analyzing the event. That ship didn't use any weapon we know of. It unleashed some kind of electromagnetic pulse, but it was unlike anything in our databases. It was adaptive." Adaptive? Trescall turned to face her. "What does that mean?" "Our own EMP weapons are like a sledgehammer," Marilyn explained, her voice shaking just a little. "They blast everything with the same wave of energy. But what that ship used, it was more like it had a unique key for every single lock. It specifically targeted our command and control systems, our weapon arrays, our engine cores. It intentionally left life support and emergency power running. Whoever designed that weapon knew exactly how our ships are built. They knew our systems better than we do." The weight of that statement settled over the bridge like a funeral shroud. The Valoran Empire had never shared its technology with anyone. Their ship schematics were among the most highly classified secrets in the galaxy. And yet somehow, these humans, from a world that was supposed to be a primitive backwater, had not only figured out their tech, but they had also figured out how to surgically disable it. "Maybe they captured one of our ships," Captain Zevthor suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe rebels sold them our secrets." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't the answer. What they had just seen was far beyond simple stolen technology. This was something else entirely. The human ship just hung there in space, a dark shape against the stars on the main view screen. It hadn't budged since it had systematically dismantled their entire fleet. Now, it just waited, like a panther watching its cornered prey, letting the fear sink in. "Incoming transmission," the comms officer announced, her voice trembling slightly. "Audio only. It's from the human ship." "Put it on screen," Admiral Trescall ordered, his voice a low growl. He instinctively straightened his decorated uniform, a reflex born from decades of service. An admiral of the Empire would show dignity even in the face of utter annihilation. But the voice that echoed across the bridge wasn't the cold, mechanical tone he expected. It was human, a woman's voice, calm and filled with an unshakable authority that made every last person on the bridge freeze and listen. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Retribution. I'm speaking directly to Admiral Trescall of the Valorian Empire." Her voice was steady. "Your fleet is disabled, but it is not destroyed. Your crews are alive, and they are unharmed. We did this on purpose. We could have turned every one of your ships into stardust. We chose not to. I need you to understand that before we go any further." Trescall finally found his own voice, though it was rougher than he liked. "What is it that you want, Captain?" "I want to tell your empire a story," Captain Chen replied coolly. 500 years ago, your scouts visited a little blue planet called Earth. They took a look at our primitive technology, decided we weren't worth the effort, and flagged our system as a dead zone. Then you forgot all about us. That was your first mistake." "We made no mistake," Trescall said, but his words had no fire behind them. "Earth had no space travel. You had no advanced technology. The survey records were very clear." "Oh, the survey records were correct," Captain Chen agreed. "Back then, we couldn't even leave our own atmosphere. We had no faster-than-light capability. By your standards, we were primitive. But there's something your scouts didn't understand about humanity. We adapt, we learn, and most importantly, we prepare." Marilyn's fingers were a blur across her console. She was desperately trying to trace the signal, to get any piece of information she could about the human vessel. What she found made her gasp. "Admiral," she whispered urgently, "Sir, I'm detecting something else. That ship, It's not alone. I'm picking up dozens of faint energy signatures. They're using some kind of stealth, but they're out there. At least 24 more ships. They've been watching us this entire time. A feeling of pure ice spread through Trescol's stomach. 24 ships hiding in plain sight, completely undetectable until now. The single human ship in front of them wasn't a lone wolf. It was the tip of the spear. After your scouts left, Captain Chen continued, completely unaware that her secret was out. The governments of Earth did something that had never been done before. We united. Every nation, every culture, every single person on our planet came together because we realized one very important thing. The galaxy wasn't empty, and sooner or later someone was going to come back. As friends or as conquerors, we had to be ready for either outcome. So you've been getting ready for 500 years? Trescol asked, preparing for a war with us? Not war, Captain Chen corrected him. Preparation. We studied every trace your scouts left behind, the radiation from your engines, the electromagnetic signatures from your sensors, bits and pieces of your communications. We learned your language from radio signals you never bothered to encrypt. We watched your empire grow. We saw how you deal with anyone who defies you. We saw what you did to the Calthine when they asked for their freedom. Captain Zevthor stepped forward. The Calthine were rebels. They broke imperial law. They had to be brought back in line. There was a long silence before Captain Chen spoke again. When she did, her voice was ice. They were a people who wanted to rule themselves. You firebombed their cities because they wouldn't obey you. Over 2 million dead, men, women, and children. We watched it all on our sensors, and that was the day humanity made a choice. We would never let the Valoran Empire do that to Earth. You don't get it, Trescol said, surprised at how defensive his own voice sounded. The Empire keeps order across 847 systems. Without that order, there would be chaos, war, and suffering. You keep control, Captain Chen shot back. That's not the same thing as order. And now you're about to learn something about us. We don't do well with being controlled. We tried it on ourselves for thousands of years. Empires rose and empires fell on Earth. Every last one of them thought they'd last forever. Every last one of them crumbled. We learned from that. We learned that nobody has the right to rule over another without their permission. Marilyn looked up from her console. Admiral, I'm picking up more readings. The hidden ships are moving into formation. They're boxing us in. On the main view screen, the blackness of space seemed to ripple. One by one, ships materialized out of thin air. They had been there the whole time, hidden by some kind of stealth technology that made them completely invisible to Imperial sensors. The ships were all different shapes and sizes, but they all had the same dark, angular look as the Retribution. 27 ships. The Retribution and 26 others, facing down an Imperial fleet that couldn't even fire its weapons. Let me tell you what happens next, Captain Chen said, her voice completely calm, as if stating simple facts. In about 6 hours, a much bigger Imperial fleet is going to arrive. Your high command will have gotten Admiral Trescol's distress signal. They'll send reinforcements, probably the 7th Battle Group, around 250 ships, including your newest dreadnought. How could you possibly know that? Captain Zevthor demanded. Because we've been listening to your communications for 500 years, Captain Chen replied. We know your military protocols. We know your response patterns. We know how your empire thinks. And that, Captain, is the difference between us. You never took the time to learn anything about us. You just assumed we'd stay primitive. You assumed wrong. For the first time in decades, Trescol felt a knot of fear in his stomach. Not for himself, but for his empire. Everything he knew about strategy told him they were up against a superior force, not superior in numbers or firepower, but in something far more dangerous: knowledge, preparation, and purpose. "What are your demands?" he asked quietly. "I don't have demands, Admiral," Captain Chen said. "I have a message, and you are going to deliver it to your high command. Are you ready?" Trescall nodded, then remembered she couldn't see him. "Yes, I'm ready." "Tell your leaders this: Earth wants nothing from the Valoran Empire. We don't want your territory. We don't want your resources. We are not here to conquer you. We just want to be left alone, in peace. But if your empire ever comes to Earth with hostile intent, if you try to do to us what you did to the Calthene, you won't be facing 1 ship or 20 ships. You'll be facing humanity, all of humanity. And Admiral, you need to understand something about humans." She paused, and in that silence, Trescall could feel the weight of centuries. "We are very, very good at war." The communication link went dead. The bridge was silent, except for the hum of emergency power and the soft beeping of Mirlin's console. "Sir," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "the human ships are leaving. They're pulling away." On the view screen, the 27 dark ships began to move. They didn't use engines like theirs. There was no fiery plume, no engine flare. They simply accelerated, moving faster and faster until they blurred into streaks of light and then vanished. Faster than light travel without using jump gates or any visible propulsion, just instant acceleration to impossible speeds. "Where are they going?" Captain Zevthor asked. "Heading for Earth's solar system," Mirlin reported. "At that speed, they'll be there in less than an hour." Trescall just stared at the empty patch of space where the human fleet had been. His mind was reeling, trying to process everything that had just happened: the disabled fleet, the hidden ships, the casual display of superior technology, and the most unsettling part of it all, their restraint. Captain Chen could have wiped them from existence. She could have destroyed 73 ships and their crews, tens of thousands of Valorans dead in an instant. But she chose not to. That decision scared him more than any weapon ever could. "How long until we get main systems back online?" he asked. The engineering officer, who had been scrambling at his station, looked up. His face was grim. "Sir, whatever they did to our systems, it's deep. The damage isn't physical, it's in the software. Every command protocol has been completely scrambled. We're going to have to manually reset and reboot every single system. 12 hours minimum, sir. Maybe more." 12 hours. The human fleet would be long gone by then. And the 7th battle group would arrive in 6 hours, only to find the entire Imperial fleet floating dead in space, utterly defeated. "Get to work," Trescall ordered. "I want this ship running as soon as possible." As the crew scrambled to obey, Captain Zevthor sidled up next to the Admiral. He spoke in a low voice, meant only for Trescall's ears. "Sir, what are we going to tell High Command? How do we possibly explain this?" Trescall didn't answer right away. How could he explain that everything the Empire believed about its own superiority was a lie? How could he tell his superiors that somewhere out in the galaxy a species existed that could dismantle them without breaking a sweat? How could he admit that he, an admiral with 60 years of service, had been beaten without firing a single successful shot? "We tell them the truth," he finally said. "We tell them Earth is not a dead zone anymore. We tell them humanity is not primitive. And we tell them that if they send the 7th battle group to Earth, they are making a catastrophic mistake." "Will they listen?" Captain Zevthor asked. Trescall thought of the Grand Marshal and the High Council. He thought of 3,000 years of conquest and unbroken victory. He thought of the deep-seated pride that was woven into the very fabric of Valoran society. The belief that they were the apex predator, the pinnacle of power in the galaxy. No, he said softly. They won't listen. They'll think the humans got lucky. They'll think we were incompetent. They will send the fleet, because that's what the Empire always does. Overwhelming force, total victory. It's worked for 3,000 years. And now? Captain Zevthor prompted. Trescol looked out at the empty space where the human ships had been. He thought about Captain Chen's calm voice, the flawless precision of their attack, the 27 ships that had been hiding in plain sight, the 500 years of preparation. He thought about a species that came together when threatened, instead of falling apart. Now, he said slowly, the 7th Battle Group is going to learn the same lesson we just did. And I pray to the ancestors that some of them survive to bring the message home. Because if they don't, if High Command refuses to believe us, they'll just keep sending more fleets. They'll escalate, and eventually the humans will stop showing restraint. Captain Zevthor's face turned pale. You think the humans were holding back? I know they were holding back, Trescol said. He walked to the view screen and placed one clawed hand against the cool surface. Captain Chen said they could have destroyed us. I believe her. She could have annihilated this entire fleet and left no one alive to tell the story. But she didn't. She disabled us. She left us alive. She even made sure our life support stayed on so we wouldn't suffocate. That's not what a warrior does to an enemy. Then what is it? Captain Zevthor asked. Trescol turned away from the screen, his face heavy with a truth he was only just beginning to grasp. It's what a teacher does to a student. She's trying to teach us something. She's trying to show us that the old way, our way, doesn't work anymore, that the age of the Empire is coming to an end. He walked to his command chair and collapsed into it, suddenly feeling every single one of his years. The question is, are we smart enough to learn the lesson, or are we just stubborn enough to get ourselves killed fighting it? All around him, his crew worked tirelessly to repair the ship, but Trescol knew that no amount of engineering could fix what had truly been broken today. The myth of imperial invincibility was gone. The belief that the Valoran Empire stood alone at the top of the galactic food chain had been shattered. Somewhere out there, speeding toward their home star, humanity was waiting, and they had been waiting for 500 years. The 7th Battle Group had no idea what was coming for them. Model D. Fear was a luxury Captain Sarah Chen couldn't afford, not while seated in the command chair of the USC Retribution. She watched her crew move with a quiet, practiced rhythm that made the bridge feel like a well-oiled machine. It wasn't as grand as an Imperial flagship, but every console and every screen had a deadly purpose. All ships reporting in, Captain, Commander James Park announced from the tactical station. He'd been her second-in-command for 15 years, a rock she could always count on. No damage, all systems in the green. The Imperial fleet never even landed a hit. Oh, they fired plenty of shots, Sarah corrected, a grim smile touching her lips. They just didn't hit a thing. The ship's pilot, Lieutenant Maya Torres, swiveled in her chair. That almost felt wrong, Captain. I mean, 73 ships, an entire Imperial battle group, gone in a matter of seconds. Are these guys really the same force that rules most of the galaxy? Sarah knew exactly what she meant. For 500 years, humanity had whispered tales of the Valorian Empire, wondering if they could ever truly stand against them. The real thing had felt strangely easy, but she refused to let victory breed arrogance. Don't ever underestimate them, she warned, her voice firm. We won today because we held all the cards. We picked the battlefield. We've been studying them for 5 centuries while they had no clue we were even here. Our weapons were literally built to dismantle theirs. If they knew what was coming, she continued, this fight would have looked a whole lot different. Do you think they'll come for Earth now? Commander Park asked, his eyes on the tactical display. The map showed their path home, a clear shot. Behind them floated the silent, disabled hulks of 73 Imperial ships. "They'll come," Sarah confirmed. "The Empire doesn't ignore a black eye. They'll see this as an insult, and they'll want to make a statement. I'm betting they send a much bigger fleet, maybe even the entire 7th Battle Group their intel says they deploy for major problems." 250 ships, Lieutenant Torres whispered, the number hanging in the air. "Against our defense fleet, can we actually win?" "We're about to find out," Sarah said. She opened a ship-wide channel, her voice echoing through every corridor. "All hands, this is the captain. I know you're feeling good, and you should be. We faced down an Imperial fleet and didn't get a scratch. But this was just the warm-up. What happens next is the test we've been preparing for over the last 500 years. Stay sharp, stay focused, remember who you're fighting for." She cut the channel, her thoughts drifting back through history, to the day humanity's destiny changed forever. 5 centuries ago, the Valorian scouts had arrived. They took a quick look at Earth, labeled it primitive, and moved on, completely unaware they'd been noticed. But a few people, governments, top scientists, they knew. They understood humanity was no longer alone, and they were hopelessly outmatched. What happened next was a miracle. Lifelong enemies became allies. Nations pooled their resources. The entire human race united with one simple goal: survive. They knew they could never catch up to a star-faring empire head-on, so they cheated. Instead of massive engines, they invented quantum drives that could fold space itself. While the Empire built bigger shields, humanity developed metamaterial armor that could absorb and scatter energy blasts. They didn't build bigger guns, they built smarter ones, and they hid it all in plain sight. Every warship was disguised as a simple cargo freighter. Every weapons platform looked like a deep space mining station. For 500 years, humanity played possum, pretending to be trapped in their own solar system while secretly preparing for the war they prayed would never come. "Captain," Commander Park's voice cut through her thoughts, "we have a Priority 1 transmission from Earth Defense Command. It's Admiral Kowalski." Sarah sat up straight. Admiral James Kowalski was the top dog, the supreme commander of all United Space Command forces. A direct call from him meant things just got serious. "Patch him through." The main view screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Kowalski's stern face. He was an older man, with graying hair and tired eyes that missed nothing. "Captain Chen," he began, skipping the pleasantries. "Good work out there. We saw the whole thing. Your strategy was flawless, but we've got a problem." "The 7th Battle Group," Sarah stated. It wasn't a guess. "Our long-range sensors spotted them 30 minutes ago, 253 ships to be exact, and they are moving fast." "They'll be in our solar system in about 72 hours, Kowalski continued, "and they aren't coming to negotiate. Intel says they're armed to the teeth. They want to make an example out of us." Sarah could feel the tension rise on the bridge. 73 ships had been a challenge. 253 was a nightmare. "What are our orders, sir?" "I'm giving you and the other commanders a choice," the Admiral said, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "You can fall back to Earth and join the main defensive line, or you can go on the offensive, hit them before they even get here." "We lose our biggest advantage if we attack first," Commander Park pointed out. "Our orbital defenses are our strongest play." "That's true," Kowalski conceded. "But if we fight them at Earth, any ship that breaks through our lines could hit the planet. We'd be risking billions of lives. If you meet them in deep space, you buy us time to evacuate the major cities and set up a last line of defense, even if you lose." Sarah heard the unspoken part loud and clear. He was asking her to take 27 ships against 253, a suicide mission designed to buy Earth a few precious hours. She didn't even have to think about it. "We'll intercept them," she said, her voice steady. We'll hit them with everything we've got. But Admiral, I need authorization to use our full arsenal. No holding back." Kowalski gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Authorization granted. Your rules of engagement are weapons-free. But Captain, remember what separates us from them. The Valorans destroy because they can. We fight to protect. Don't ever forget that." "Understood, sir. Retribution out." The screen went black. Sarah looked at her crew. They were so young, most of them born into this 500-year-old mission. They'd trained their whole lives for a day just like this one. "All ships, assume battle formation Theta," she commanded. "We're going hunting. Lay in a course to intercept the 7th Battle Group. Maximum warp." "Course laid in, Captain," Lieutenant Torres confirmed, her fingers flying across the console. "Quantum drive engaging in 3, 2, 1. The ship gave a slight shudder as space itself seemed to twist around them. The Retribution and her sister ships disappeared from reality, slipping between the folds of the universe, leaving no trace for Imperial sensors to follow. They would reach their target in 18 hours, and the Valoran Empire was about to learn what 500 years of quiet preparation truly looked like. But Sarah wasn't thinking about the battle. She was remembering something her old mentor once told her. "The Valorans think strength is about never backing down," he'd said. "They see mercy as a weakness, and that's exactly why we'll win. Because sometimes, Sarah, the strongest thing you can do is choose not to destroy your enemy, giving them a chance to be better. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." She desperately hoped he was right, because in 72 hours the entire galaxy would see if humanity's way was better, or if Earth would become just another conquered world on the Empire's long list. Meanwhile, on the imperial capital of Valoria Prime, the High Council was in chaos. In a chamber carved from the rock of their very first conquered planet, 12 counselors sat before Grand Marshal Kethvar, the supreme commander of the imperial military. He was ancient, his scales faded to a pale gray, but his eyes burned with cold fire. "Explain to me," he said, his voice a low growl, "how a fleet from some backwater primitive world managed to disable an entire Imperial battle group." A nervous silence filled the vast chamber. No one dared to be the one to deliver the bad news. Finally, Counselor Vezitar, the head of Imperial Intelligence, rose to his feet. "Grand Marshal," he began, "we've analyzed Admiral Treskel's report. It seems Earth is not as primitive as we were led to believe. They possess highly advanced technology, stealth systems, weapons specifically engineered to defeat our own. They claim they have been getting ready for this encounter for 500 years. 500 years? Kethvar repeated, disbelief warring with fury. "You are telling me that an entire species has been preparing for war with the Empire for 5 centuries, and our intelligence network saw absolutely nothing?" Vezitar swallowed hard. "They were exceptionally careful, Grand Marshal. For centuries, they had hidden their military power behind a mask of civilian life. Their most advanced ships were kept far from our prying eyes. Until today, they seem to be just what our first scouts reported, a primitive species trapped in their own solar system before they could even travel to the stars." "Seem to be," Kethvar repeated quietly. "And what exactly do they seem to be now?" Another counselor, a younger, more hot-headed man named Treskor, shot to his feet. "They seem to be a threat that needs to be wiped out. Grand Marshal, I'm formally recommending we use the planet killers. A direct strike on Earth. Let's finish this before it grows into a real problem." Several other counselors murmured their approval, but others looked horrified. "Planet killers?" Counselor Miracel asked, her voice thin with disbelief. As one of the council's most senior members, she had always been a voice of caution. Those weapons have been outlawed for 500 years. After the Keelan massacre, We swore we would never unleash them again. That was an entirely different situation, Tresker shot back. The Keelans were a part of the Empire. They were our own citizens who turned against us. Earth is an outside force, a species that's been lying about their true strength and plotting against us for who knows how long. If we don't handle this decisively, they could give other worlds ideas. He's got a point, another counselor added. If news gets out that one little human ship crushed an entire Imperial fleet, every planet we hold will start to dream of rebellion. It'll spread like a wildfire. Grand Marshal Kethvar listened patiently as the arguments flew. He had been commanding fleets for 70 years. He'd seen combat in every major conflict the Empire had faced in his lifetime, and he understood a truth these politicians couldn't grasp. "We will not be using the planet killers," he stated, his voice cutting through the noise. The room fell silent, not out of a sudden sense of mercy or respect for some old promise, but because they knew his reasoning was tactical. If we burn their world to ash without figuring out how they did what they did, we learn absolutely nothing, and you can never truly defeat an enemy you don't understand. He walked toward a holographic map glowing in the middle of the room. A single red dot marked Earth's location in the galaxy. "I'm sending in the 7th Battle Group," he announced. 253 ships, our most skilled crews, our very best technology. Their mission is to engage the human fleet and find out what they're capable of. If these humans are really as advanced as Admiral Trechikol claimed, the 7th will fall back and report. If not, they will take Earth and will pick through the wreckage for their secrets. "And what if the 7th fails?" Counselor Mirakel asked, her voice barely a whisper. Grand Marshal Kethvar's expression was stone. "Then we will know the Empire is facing a danger unlike anything in our history, and we will have to make a choice. Try to make peace, or escalate to a total war." The counselors let that sink in. The Empire had never once tried to make peace. For 3,000 years, its only options had been to conquer or to destroy. The very concept of negotiating with an enemy was almost blasphemous. "I want every Imperial fleet on high alert," Kethvar commanded, "and I want an immediate overhaul of our cyber warfare defenses. If the humans can shut down our ships from a distance, we need a counter for it, yesterday. I also want our science teams going over every last second of Admiral Trechikol's sensor logs. How do their ships move like that? How do they stay hidden? What in the galaxy are their weapons made of? I want answers." "Yes, Grand Marshal," the counselors replied as one. The session ended, and they began to file out of the chamber. Counselor Mirakel approached Kethvar as he stood alone. "You're worried," she stated. It wasn't a question. Kethvar gave a slow, heavy nod. "Admiral Trechikol is one of our finest. He's fought in 17 major campaigns and has never known defeat. If he tells me these humans are different, I have to believe him." "Different in what way?" "They think differently," Kethvar explained. "Their entire strategy, disabling our ships instead of blowing them to pieces, taking our crews prisoner instead of slaughtering them. That isn't how you win a war. That's not how the Empire has maintained its rule for 3,000 years. "Maybe," Mirakel offered gently, "that's exactly why we should be worried. Because maybe they aren't trying to win a war in the way we've always known it. Maybe they're trying to change the very rules of the game." Grand Marshal Kethvar stared at the star map, his eyes fixed on the tiny red dot that was Earth. "Then they're about to get a hard lesson. The Empire doesn't play by anyone's rules but its own." The 7th Battle Group ripped through space-time, emerging near the orbit of Neptune. 253 warships fell into a perfect menacing formation, the absolute pride of the Valoran Empire. Behind them, the distant sun was just another star in the blackness. Ahead of them, nestled in the inner solar system, was Earth. "Grand Marshal Kethvar," stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Absolute Victory. It was the newest dreadnought in the entire Imperial Navy, double the size of a standard battlecruiser and carrying enough firepower to crack a continent in half. He had overseen its creation personally, and now he would use it to teach humanity the price of defiance. "Sensor update," he commanded. The officer at the sensor station scanned his console. "Sir, I have multiple contacts all over the system. We're talking hundreds of them. But Grand Marshal, something isn't right. The readings are all wrong." "Explain," Kethvar said, his voice steady. "Sir, I'm reading mining outposts near Jupiter, science stations in Saturn's rings, comms relays orbiting the inner planets, even civilian ships flying between Mars and Earth. It all looks exactly like a normal developing civilization, but the energy signatures don't match. They're far too powerful, too sophisticated." "It's a disguise," Captain Norval said from his side. She was Kethvar's second-in-command, a tactical genius. "Those mining stations are gun platforms. The research labs are military garrisons. The civilian freighters are warships in hiding. They've turned their entire solar system into one giant fortress." Kethvar nodded slowly. "Impressive. And it confirms what Admiral Trechikol saw. These humans are anything but primitive. They're clever." "How many dedicated warships can you get a lock on?" he asked. The sensor officer's fingers flew across his console. "It's hard to be sure, sir. I can confirm at least 300 contacts that are definitely military grade, but there could be way more out there. Their stealth tech is better than anything we've ever seen. 300 ships against his 253. The odds were closer than Kethvar liked, but numbers weren't the whole story. Imperial ships were bigger, stronger, and backed by 3,000 years of battlefield doctrine. "Open a channel, broadcast on all frequencies. I want to talk to whoever is in charge of this defense force." The communications officer complied. "Channel is open, Grand Marshal." Kethvar drew himself up to his full height. When he spoke, his voice was the sound of absolute authority. "This is Grand Marshal Kethvar of the Valorian Empire. You have fired upon Imperial forces. You have declared yourselves independent without our permission. Under Imperial law, these are acts of rebellion. I am authorized to give you one and only one chance to surrender. Power down your defense systems. Prepare your world for occupation. Any resistance will lead to the complete annihilation of your military and the enslavement of your people. You have 5 minutes to comply." Only silence answered. On the bridge, the crew held their breath. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. Then, a voice crackled through the speakers. It was male, unnervingly calm, with an accent the Empire's translation software struggled to identify. "Grand Marshal Kethvar, this is Fleet Admiral James Kowalski of the United Earth Space Command. We do not recognize your authority in our solar system. We did not attack your forces, they attacked us. We simply defended ourselves. We want no part in a war, but we will not give up our freedom. Leave our space now, in peace, and this will all be over. If you attack us, you will regret it." A low murmur spread across the bridge. The sheer nerve of it, a backwater species standing up to the Empire, actually threatening them. "You do realize," Kethvar said, his voice dangerously low, "that I command the single most powerful battle group in the Imperial fleet, that I have personally overseen the destruction of entire civilizations, that your resistance is pointless." "We realize that you believe that to be true," Admiral Kowalski replied evenly. "We also realize you've never had to fight anyone quite like us. This is your last warning, Grand Marshal. Leave now. Don't force our hand and make us destroy your fleet." Now, Kethvar felt a flash of real anger. They had the audacity to threaten him, to imply they could actually destroy the mighty 7th Battle Group. "All ships!" he roared. "Battle formation Alpha! Prepare for engagement! Show these primitives the true power of the Empire!" The fleet moved as one, a dance of deadly precision. Ships slid into position. Weapon ports glowed as they charged. Shields shimmered to full power. It was a breathtaking sight, the peak of 3 millennia of military dominance. "Sir!" the sensor officer yelled, his voice tight with alarm. "The human ships! They aren't falling back! They're moving toward us, all of them! And sir, the mining stations and satellites are breaking apart, shedding their outer shells! They're revealing massive weapon arrays." On the main view screen, Kethvar watched the swarm of human ships. They weren't moving into any recognizable battle line. Instead, they were just scattering, spreading out across the solar system in what looked like a completely random, chaotic pattern. No formation, no coordination. It was a mess. "They're amateurs," Captain Norval scoffed. "They don't even understand the basics of fleet combat." But a cold feeling of dread began to creep up Kethvar's spine. Nothing about these humans had been amateur so far. Why would their tactics suddenly be so sloppy? "All ships advance," he commanded. "Fire as soon as you are in range." The 7th Battle Group surged forward, a wall of imperial might. The distance between the fleets shrank. 500,000 kilometers, 400,000, 300,000. "In range, sir," the weapons officer shouted. "Fire!" The Imperial fleet unleashed hell. Hundreds of plasma bolts, kinetic missiles, and searing energy beams tore through the void of space, all aimed at the scattered human ships. At this range, with that much firepower, nothing should have been able to survive. And then the human ships moved. They didn't accelerate. They didn't turn. They simply blinked out of existence, instantly, as if they were never there. One moment, they were directly in the path of the attack. The next, they were in a completely different spot, kilometers away. The Empire's volley of destruction hit nothing but empty space. "What just happened?" Kethvar demanded. "Sir, they're using micro-jumps," the sensor officer stammered, his voice trembling. "Short-range FTL drives. They're jumping dozens of times a second. Our targeting systems can't get a lock." "Then predict their next jump and fire where they're going to be," Kethvar roared. Captain Norval screamed for predictive targeting, but it was already too late. The Imperial destroyer Relentless was the first to go. One moment, it was unleashing hellfire from its cannons. The next, it was hit from 3 different directions at the exact same time. These weren't energy blasts or missiles. They were tiny objects moving at impossible speeds, punching through the destroyer's shields as if they were made of paper. They tore through the armor, ripped through the hull, and the ship simply blew apart from the inside out. "Kinetic kill vehicles," Captain Norval breathed, her face pale with understanding. "They're firing solid slugs at near light speed. Our energy shields are completely useless." As if to prove her point, another ship exploded, and then a third. The humans weren't just firing wildly into the black. Each shot was a masterpiece of precision, a calculated kill. They were dismantling his fleet one ship at a time with terrifying accuracy. "All ships, evasive maneuvers!" Kethvar roared. "Scatter pattern delta!" The fleet shattered its formation, vessels peeling off in every direction to become harder targets. It didn't make a difference. The human ships were like ghosts. They'd appear, fire a fatal shot, and vanish before anyone could get a lock. "Sir, we're also getting hit with massive system disruptions," the tactical officer reported, his voice tight with panic. "Ships across the fleet are reporting weapon failures, navigation glitches. It's the same cyber warfare package that took out Admiral Treshkal's fleet." Kethvar stared at his tactical display as friendly icons turned red, one after another. Ships disabled, ships destroyed, ships in full retreat. In less than 5 minutes, he had lost 30 capital ships, 30 vessels that represented centuries of imperial engineering and training, erased in the blink of an eye. "This isn't a battle," Captain Norval said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's an execution." She was right. The humans weren't fighting like cornered animals. They were fighting like they'd already won, and this was just cleaning up. Every single move was deliberate. Every shot was a kill. There was no wasted energy, no panicked maneuvers, just cold, brutally efficient destruction. "We have to withdraw," Cathar said, the words tasting like ash. "Signal the fleet. Emergency FTL jump." "Get us out of here!" "Sir, if we retreat, the Empire will see us all dead if we stay here," Cathar snapped back. "We are not retreating. We are regrouping. Now execute the order." "Grand Marshal," the comms officer cut in, "we're getting a transmission from the human fleet. They're broadcasting on all channels." "Put it through," Cathar commanded. A new voice filled the bridge. It was female, young, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Attention, Imperial 7th Battle Group. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UESC Retribution. You are completely outmatched. Withdraw now, and we will permit you to leave. Continue this fight, and we will disable every ship you have. This is your only warning." Cathar glanced at his tactical display. 50 ships lost now. His fleet was being systematically torn to pieces, and they hadn't managed to destroy a single human vessel. Not one. He had 2 options: order a humiliating full retreat and admit utter defeat, or stay and fight, knowing his entire fleet would be turned into stardust. But just then, something else lit up his sensors. New contacts, dozens of them, pouring out from deeper in the system, from the space around Earth itself. More human ships emerging from the shadows. "Sir," the sensor officer said, his voice trembling, "I'm counting at least 200 additional contacts. They were hiding in Earth's magnetosphere, using the planet's own electromagnetic field to hide their signatures. 500 ships, maybe even more." The humans had 500 ships, and they had only sent out a tiny fraction of them to dismantle his entire battle group. They could have crushed him from the very beginning. Instead, they used a minimal force just to prove a point. They didn't need overwhelming numbers to win. They just needed to be better. "Signal all ships," Cathar said quietly, his voice hollow. "Full retreat, maximum speed." "Sir," Captain Norval started to protest. "That's an order, Captain." The fleet turned tail and ran. Imperial ships jumped to FTL in random directions, desperate to escape the slaughter. And the humans just let them go. They could have hunted them down, could have wiped out every last ship, but they didn't. As the absolute victory jumped away, it left behind the wreckage of 73 ships and the burning shame of a total, undeniable defeat. Just before they left the system, Cathar received one last transmission from Earth. "Grand Marshal," a new voice said, this one a man's deep and grizzled. "Admiral Kowalski, take this message back to your Emperor. We don't want to be your enemies. We don't want to destroy you. We just want to be left alone. But if you come back, if you ever try this again, we will not show you mercy. The ships you saw today are just the beginning. Earth has been preparing for 500 years. We have weapons you can't even imagine and technologies your empire hasn't even dreamed of. And we have something else you don't." He paused for effect. "We have a reason to fight. Every human on Earth, every single person in our fleet knows what they're protecting. Our homes, our families, our future. Your soldiers fight because they're ordered to. Ours fight because they choose to. That's the difference between us, Marshal. That's why you lost today." The transmission cut out. The bridge was silent except for the low hum of the FTL drive. Cathar stood at his command station, staring at the battle summary. He had started with 253 ships. He was returning with 180. 73 ships lost in under an hour, thousands of Valorans dead, and they had accomplished nothing except to prove that humanity was their superior. "What are we going to tell the High Council?" Captain Norval asked softly. Cathar considered it. The Empire had never lost a battle this badly, never been forced to retreat from a smaller force. The shame would be unbearable. Some on the council would surely call for his head. Others would demand an immediate all-out war to throw every ship the Empire had at Earth until it was nothing but a cinder. But Cathar had seen something today that changed everything he thought he knew. The humans could have annihilated his entire fleet with ease. They had the weapons, the numbers, and the tactical advantage. But they chose not to. They disabled ships that fought on, they destroyed those that wouldn't retreat, but they never went for total annihilation. They fought to defend, not to conquer. And somehow, that made them more dangerous than any foe the Empire had ever faced. "We tell them the truth," he said at last. "That we ran into a species that is far more advanced than we are, that we lost because we were outmatched in every single way, and that if the Empire doesn't change its ways, if we keep trying to conquer and dominate everyone we meet, humanity will be the end of us." "The High Council will never accept that," Captain Norval said. "Then the High Council is going to get a lot more of our people killed," Cathar replied grimly. He looked at the star streaks blurring past the viewport as they fled for home. "I've spent 70 years fighting for this empire. I've conquered worlds. I've destroyed our enemies. I've done horrible things in the name of imperial glory. And today, for the first time in my life, I met an enemy I simply could not defeat. Not because they were stronger, but because they were smarter, better, more human." He let out a bitter laugh at his own phrasing. "Sir?" Captain Norval looked at him confused. "It's nothing," Cathar said. "I was just realizing that for 3,000 years, we've been calling ourselves the apex of civilization, the peak of galactic evolution. And the whole time, it was a lie. We were just the biggest sharks in a pond that hadn't met a real leviathan yet. Today, we met one." As the absolute victory continued its long journey home, carrying the news of the Empire's most humiliating defeat, Cathar made a decision. He would go before the High Council. He would tell them everything he saw. And then, whether they listened or not, he would do something no Grand Marshal had ever done in Imperial history. He would recommend peace, not conquest, not subjugation, but genuine peace. Because he now knew that the only other alternative was extinction. The High Council chamber on Valoria Prime was pure chaos. Councilors were screaming over one another. Some were demanding immediate total war. Others were pleading for caution. A few even dared to whisper the forbidden word: peace. Grand Marshal Cathar stood in the middle of the storm, perfectly silent and still. He had given his report 3 hours ago. Ever since, the council had been tearing itself apart. "Enough!" Councillor Miracel's voice sliced through the din. As the eldest and most respected member of the council, her word carried immense weight. "We accomplished nothing by screaming at each other like children. Grand Marshal Cathar, I have only one question for you. In your professional military opinion, can we defeat Earth in a full-scale war?" The chamber instantly fell silent. Every single eye in the room was on Cathar. He chose his words with extreme care. "If we commit every ship, every weapon, every resource this empire possesses, if we are willing to sacrifice millions of our own people, if we resort to using planet killers and tactics of genocide, then maybe, possibly, we could destroy Earth." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But it would cost us everything we are. And even if we won, we would face rebellions across every system under our control. Every subjugated species would see that the great empire could be challenged, that we could be wounded, that we could be beaten. The empire as we know it would cease to exist one way or another.
So what do you suggest? Counselor Treacher demanded, his voice dripping with scorn. He was one of the hardliners, still bellowing for all-out war. That we bow down to these primitives, that we simply allow them to humiliate us? They have already humiliated us, Cather stated bluntly. Twice, first with Admiral Treshkull's fleet and now with mine. To pretend otherwise is pure foolishness. What I suggest is that we do something the Empire has not done in 3,000 years. I suggest we talk to them, not as conquerors to the conquered, but as equals. The chamber erupted in outrage once again. Equals? The Valoran Empire did not have equals. The entire foundation of their society was built on the principle of dominance and hierarchy. But Counselor Miracel simply raised a hand, and the room fell silent once more. The Grand Marshal makes a valid point. We have 3 options. Imagine an empire that has ruled the galaxy with an iron fist for thousands of years. Now, imagine they just got their butts handed to them by a bunch of upstarts from a little blue planet called Earth. What happens next? You've got 3 choices. 1, go all in on a war you might not even win. 2, tuck your tail and watch your entire empire fall apart. Or 3, talk to the people who just beat you. A Valorian leader named Tresor spat out the word, "Coexist, we are the Valorian Empire, we rule." But another wiser voice, a Grand Marshal named Kethar, quietly corrected him. We ruled, past tense, our time on top is over. Earth proved that. So the real question is, do we change or do we die? While they were arguing light years away, Captain Sarah Chen was staring out a window at that beautiful blue and green home. If you want to know what happens when the schoolyard bully finally gets a bloody nose and asks to be friends, stick around. You okay, Captain? Her commander Park asked, holding out a cup of coffee. He offered her one of the mugs.
Just thinking, Sarah said, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. We won the battle, sure. The Empire ran home, but this isn't over, not by a long shot. You think they'll be back for round 2? Park asked. I don't know, Sarah confessed, and that was the scary part. If they come back throwing everything they have at us, I think we'll win. I really do. But the cost, so many people would die, on their side and on ours. She took a sip of coffee. I can't stop thinking about what Admiral Kowalski said. We have to be careful not to become the monsters we're fighting. Park gave a slow, thoughtful nod. The Empire keeps everyone in line with fear and brute force. If we win by doing the same thing, then we're just the next Empire. Exactly, Sarah whispered, her eyes fixed on Earth. We spent 500 years getting ready for a war, she said. Maybe we should have spent a little more of that time getting ready for peace. Right on cue, her communicator chirped. Admiral Kowalski's face popped up on the tiny screen. Captain Chen, we've just gotten a message from the Valorian Empire. They want to set up a meeting. Neutral ground. They want to negotiate. Sarah's heart did a little flip-flop. Negotiate like terms of surrender? Nope, negotiate, Kowalski confirmed. Grand Marshal Kethar himself is coming, and he specifically asked for you to be there. Looks like you made quite an impression. When? Sarah managed to ask. 4 days. There's an old, forgotten space station in the middle of nowhere, halfway between us and them. It's been a ghost town for centuries, but our engineers can get the lights back on. Captain, this is the chance we were hoping for. A way to end this without more fighting. Or it's a trap, Commander Park muttered just loud enough to be heard. It's possible, Kowalski admitted. That's why the entire First Fleet will be hiding just out of sight, cloaked and ready for trouble. But Captain Chen, I need you to go in there and act like this is 100% real. Give them a chance to do the right thing. Sarah gave a firm nod. Understood, sir. I'll get a diplomatic team together. Good luck, Captain. The future of 2 civilizations could be riding on this.
The screen winked out. Sarah looked at Park. 4 days. We'd better get to work. The old station was called Unity 7. It was built eons ago as a meeting place for species that were now just dust and memories. Now it was just a silent piece of junk, spinning slowly in the void. Human engineers worked for 2 days straight to bring it back to life. They got the power on, the air breathable, and set up a big meeting room with a simple table and some chairs. They kept it basic so neither side could feel like the other was trying to look superior. When the big day arrived, Sarah showed up with a small crew. Admiral Kowalski was there, with a couple of diplomats and 4 security guards. They all wore simple, plain uniforms with no weapons, a clear sign they were there in good faith. The Imperial group arrived right on the dot. Grand Marshal Keithar was at the front, flanked by a counselor named Miral and a few assistants. They were decked out in full military dress, covered in medals and shiny rank pins. For a few seconds, that felt like an eternity. The two groups just stared at each other. Humans and Valorans, people who had been training to wipe each other out just days before. Finally, Keithar took a step forward. Admiral Kowalski, Captain Chen, thank you for coming. Thank you for asking, Kowalski shot back smoothly. Please, have a seat. We've got a lot to talk about. As they all sat down around the table, it felt completely unreal to Sarah. A few days ago, her job was to blow this man's ships out of the sky. Now, they were sitting across from each other like they were about to discuss a business merger. I'll get straight to the point, Keithar began. The Valorian Empire cannot win a war against Earth, not without destroying ourselves in the process. This is a hard truth I've had to explain to our High Council. Some of them get it, others don't. But enough of them listen to send me here to talk. Talk about what exactly? Kowalski asked, his voice steady. Peace, Keithar said, plain and simple. Real peace. Not you bowing to us, not a conditional surrender, a peace between two equals. Counselor Miral leaned in. The Empire has ruled by conquering for 3,000 years. That time is coming to an end. Earth showed us that. But we still have 847 systems, trillions of citizens, and a massive military. What we're offering is a complete change to how the galaxy is run. I'm listening, Kowalski said, choosing his words carefully. For the next hour, they laid it all out. The Empire had a shocking proposal, an immediate end to all fighting. They would officially recognize Earth as independent. They'd get rid of all their planet-destroying weapons. And the biggest surprise of all, they wanted to create a new galactic government where every species got a say. You're proposing a galactic democracy? Sarah asked, her eyebrows shooting up. More like a federation, Miral clarified. Every system keeps its own government, but big decisions that affect everyone are made by a council where every species has an equal vote. Valorans, humans, everyone. And what about all the species you've already conquered? Kowalski pressed. The ones living under Imperial rule right now. They get a choice, Keithar said. They can stay with a new, reformed empire where they'll have full rights, or they can become fully independent. The decision will be theirs. Sarah and Admiral Kowalski shared a look. This was way more than they ever could have hoped for. But was it for real? Why? Sarah asked, looking Keithar right in the eye. Why are you offering all this? You could still fight. You could burn everything to the ground for a chance to keep your empire. Why do this instead? Keithar was silent for a moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a deep, hard-earned wisdom. Because I'm tired, Captain Chen. I have spent 70 years fighting for the Empire. I've watched worlds turn to ash. I've given orders that still visit me in my nightmares. And I did it all because I truly believed the Empire was a good thing, that our power kept order, that taking over was better than chaos. He looked straight at her. And then I fought your fleet. And I saw something new. I saw strength that was held back, power that was only used to defend, not to attack. You could have vaporized my entire fleet. You had us beat, but you let us go. You chose mercy when you had every reason not to. And in that moment, I knew that everything I had ever believed was a lie. The Empire doesn't keep order. It creates fear. And you can't build anything lasting on fear. Sooner or later, everyone fights back. So this is about survival, Kowalski stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. Yes, Keithar admitted, but it's also about being better. 3,000 years of conquering hasn't made the galaxy a better place. Maybe it's time we tried something else. They hashed things out for 2 more days, hammering out all the little details. It wasn't easy. There were 3 millennia of bad blood and violence between them. But slowly, a plan started to take shape. They called it the Treaty of Unity, named after the old station where it all happened. The main points were simple, but would change the galaxy forever. The fighting stops now. Every species in the Empire gets to vote on whether they want to be independent within a year. The ones who stay get a seat on a new galactic council. All the superweapons get dismantled. They would even start sharing technology, with humans trading some of their new ideas for the Empire's ancient knowledge. And the biggest promise of all, every member agreed to protect each other. If some new threat showed up from the dark, they would all face it as one. There's just one more thing, Keithar said as they got ready to sign. Earth's military, your ships, your weapons, they're the most powerful things in this part of space. What do you plan to do with all that power? Before Kowalski could answer, Sarah spoke up. The same thing we've always done. We'll defend. We'll protect. We didn't come out to the stars to build our own empire. We came out here to make sure we survived, and maybe, if we're lucky, to help others do the same. A small smile touched Counselor Mirael's lips. Then perhaps, she said softly, the galaxy chose the right people to lead us into a new era. And with that, they signed the treaty. Leaders from both sides put their names on the document that would change the course of history. When it was all over, Keithar held out his hand to Admiral Kowalski. The Admiral took it without a second thought. My people will have a hard time with this, Keithar said quietly. A lot of them will see it as a defeat. It's not easy to change 3,000 years of thinking overnight. Change is never easy, Kowalski replied, but it's always worth it. 5 years later, Sarah Chen stood on a stage in the brand new Galactic Council building, right back on Unity Station. The station wasn't a wreck anymore. It had been rebuilt into a massive, gleaming symbol of cooperation. In the huge circular room, leaders from 40 different species sat listening, Valorans, humans, and dozens of others. Some were newly independent. Others had chosen to stay with the reformed empire, now as equals. But every single one of them had a voice. Sarah was supposed to give a speech about military teamwork, but as she looked out at all those different faces, she couldn't help but think about the crazy road that got them there. From the day Valoran scouts first found Earth 500 years ago, through all the fear and preparation, through the battles that almost destroyed them, to the peace that created something new. 5 years ago, she began, her voice ringing clear. Humanity and the Valoran Empire were enemies. We fought, we hurt each other, we both lost people we loved, but we also learned something. We learned that real strength isn't about being the boss, it's about keeping people safe. And we learned that the absolute strongest thing you can do is to choose peace, even when war looks like the only way. She gestured towards the seat where Grand Marshal Kethvar was sitting. Though he was long retired from the military, he now served as a key advisor to the new Galactic Council. The Grand Marshal once told me that the Valorian Empire spent 3,000 years trying to build an orderly galaxy using fear. It never worked. But in just 5 years of cooperation,
We've achieved more than all those centuries of conquest ever could. We've shared technologies. We've charted new worlds side by side. We've stood together to defend each other from outside threats." She took a moment, letting her eyes sweep across the crowded chamber. "We have proven that different peoples, with different histories and different ways of thinking, can build something better together. Not because we are forced to, but because we choose to. And that choice," she finished, "is what makes all the difference." The applause that erupted wasn't the polite, reserved clapping of diplomats. It was thunderous, genuine, and filled with real gratitude. Later, after the session had wrapped up, Kethvar made his way over to her. He seemed older now, the vibrant color of his scales having faded with time, but his eyes held a peace she had never seen during the long years of war. "A powerful speech, Captain," he rumbled. "I was just telling the truth, Marshal," Sarah replied with a small smile. "So, how is the memoir coming along?" "Slowly," Kethvar admitted with a sigh. "It's much harder than commanding a battle fleet, trying to write down everything I did, everything the Empire did, but it has to be done. The generations to come must understand the mistakes we made so they are never repeated." "What are you going to call it?" Sarah asked. "The day we met predators who chose not to kill," Kethvar said, his voice soft but clear. "Because that was the day everything changed. You had the power to erase us from the stars, but you chose mercy. That single choice didn't just save our civilization, it saved both of ours." Sarah nodded slowly. "And now we watch each other's backs. Funny how things turn out." "Not funny," Kethvar corrected gently. "Inevitable. The universe is too vast, too full of dangers for any one species to face it alone. Not even humanity, not even the old empire. We need each other." A little while later, back on the UEC Retribution, which was now permanently docked at Unity Station as a symbol of their alliance, Sarah was in her quarters, gazing at the distant blue marble of Earth on her view screen. Commander Park entered after his signature quick knock. "Just got new orders from Admiral Kowalski," he said. "There's a situation brewing out near the Galactic core. Another empire, apparently even bigger than the Valorians were, is on an aggressive expansion kick. They don't know about Earth or the Unity Treaty yet." A faint smile touched Sarah's lips. "Sounds like it's time for another object lesson." "Seems that way," Park agreed. "The Retribution was requested by name. Looks like our reputation is getting around. Some are calling us the ship that ended an empire. Others call us the ship that saved one." "They're both right," Sarah said, turning away from the view of her home world. "Prep the ship for departure. Let's go show this new empire what happens when you choose conquest over cooperation." As the Retribution's quantum drives began to whine, spooling up for the jump to light speed, Sarah thought back to her speech. She thought about choices, about real strength, and about the difference between doing what's easy and doing what's right. The Valorian Empire had chosen the path of conquest for 3,000 years. It brought them power, but never peace. It gave them security, but never safety. They had control, but they never earned respect. Humanity had made a different choice, and in just 5 short years, that choice had changed the entire galaxy. Now, all they had to do was keep making it. Every day, with every new encounter, every time they met someone new out here among the stars. Because in the end, that was what set them apart from the old empires. It wasn't better weapons, or faster ships, or cleverer tactics. It was a choice.